I beg you, Genevra.
What do you want to happen?
I want to start from where we are, not from where we were. From here.
The ring was on the desk when Aldric came back into the study. He had left the room for approximately 4 minutes to pour himself a drink, because the conversation he had just concluded had been the kind of conversation that requires something to do with one's hands afterward. And when he returned, Genevra was gone, and the ring was on the desk in the position that things occupy when they have been placed with intention rather than set down absent-mindedly. It was her wedding ring. He recognized it, of course. He had put it on her finger 11 years ago, and he recognized, looking at it on the desk, that she had placed it there as her response to everything he had said in the preceding 20 minutes. He had said quite a lot. He had said that the marriage had run its course, which was a phrase his solicitor had suggested as diplomatic. He had said that they had grown apart in ways that he no longer believed were bridgeable, which was more his own language, but was still the managed version. He had said that he hoped they could address the formal separation with civility and mutual respect, which was the thing people said when they wanted the other person to receive bad news quietly. He had said all of this in the studied, careful tone of a man who has rehearsed, and Genevra had listened to all of it with her hands folded in her lap and her expression carrying the specific quality he had sometimes noticed across 11 years of marriage, the quality of a woman who is thinking faster than the conversation and who has already processed what is being said before it has finished being said. When he finished, she had looked at him for a moment. Then she had stood. She had removed the ring from her finger with the quiet efficiency of someone unclasping a piece of jewelry. She had placed it on the desk without looking at where she placed it, with the accuracy of a woman who knows the surface well enough not to need to look, and she had left the room. He had not heard her go upstairs. He had not heard the front door. He stood in the study with the drink he had gone to fetch and looked at the ring on the desk and tried to locate, in himself, the feeling he had expected to have in this moment. He had expected relief. He had expected the specific lightning of a man who has done something difficult, and difficult is now behind him. He did not feel relief. He felt the specific discomfort of a man who has received a response he was not prepared for, which was not a dramatic response, not tears, not recrimination, not the scenes he had been bracing for across 3 weeks of preparation, but silence and a ring placed without a word. He had not known what to do with silence and a ring. He had gone back to his drink. Before we continue, subscribe now and tell me in the comments. Genevra listened to 11 years of marriage be concluded, removed her ring, placed it on the desk, and left the room without saying a word. No tears, no protest, no scene. If you had been the one left holding a drink while the ring sat on your desk, what would you have done next? What Genevra had done next was go to her father. Not immediately, not that evening, which she had spent in the guest rooms of Pemberton Hall organizing the things she was going to take when she left, which was a process she had been thinking about for several months, and which took less time than most people would have expected, because she had always been clear about which things were hers and which belonged to the house. She had gone to her father the following Wednesday, which was 4 days after the ring conversation, and she had told him the situation with the directness she had always used with him, because her father, James Cavendish, was a man who preferred directness to management and who had raised his daughter to use it. Her father had listened without interrupting, which was what he always did, and when she finished he had said, "All right, what do you want to do?" This was the question she had been asking herself for 3 weeks, since she had understood that the marriage was approaching its conclusion. She had been asking it with the focused attention of a woman who did not believe in waiting for circumstances to present options, and who preferred to think about what she wanted before the circumstances arrived. What she wanted was what she had always wanted, which was to do the work she was capable of. This required some explanation for anyone who did not know Genevra well, because what she was capable of was not obvious from the outside and had not been obvious in the marriage. What she was capable of was the specific skill of looking at a large, complex landed estate, its accounts, its tenant relationships, its management structure, its income sources, and their relative efficiency, and understanding from looking what was working and what was not, and what could be done about the latter. She had been doing this at Pemberton Hall for 11 years, without being asked and without advertising it, because Aldric had been content to believe that the estate ran well, because it had always run well, and because his steward was competent, and she had been content to let him believe this, while she sat with the estate accounts in the mornings and identified the things that the steward was missing and addressed them through the quiet channels available to a woman who managed a household. The estate had run well because of Genevra. Her father knew this because Genevra had told him, in the way that she told him most things she observed about herself, factually, without either false modesty or excessive pride, as information. "I want to do this for other estates," she said, "as a profession, as something with a name and a fee." Her father looked at her. "You would advise landed families on their estate management," he said, "as a consultant." "Yes," she said. "There are no women doing this." "No," she said. "There aren't. But there are estates that need it done, and women who understand how they work, and the gap between those two things is not because the work is beyond women. It's because no one has built the structure that makes it possible." "You want to build the structure," he said. "I want to do the work," she said. "The structure is the minimum required to do the work." Her father thought about this. "You'll need a base," he said, "somewhere to work from that isn't Pemberton Hall and isn't my house." "Yes," she said. "I've been thinking about that." The base she had been thinking about was a property that her father's estate included, a dower house in the northern part of the county that had been unoccupied for 6 years and that she had always thought was the right size for 2 people or 1 person with an office. She asked if she could use it. Her father said yes. She moved there in November. The dower house required 3 weeks of organization before it was functional, which she had anticipated and had organized accordingly, and which produced a working space that was exactly what she needed. An office with good light, a comfortable sitting room for client meetings, 3 bedrooms that she needed 1 of, and a kitchen with a range that worked. She had been in the dower house for 2 weeks when the first client came. The first client was not arranged through her father's connections, which was where she had expected the initial referrals to come from. The first client came through Lady Whitmore, who had been at a dinner that November and had mentioned to 3 women at the table that she had heard James Cavendish's daughter was doing estate consulting work and that she had been managing Pemberton Hall's accounts for years without anyone knowing it. This information had moved through the table with the speed of information about intelligent women that the people at the table found surprising, and the women at the table found less surprising. One of the women at the table was the wife of Sir Edward Marsden, whose Lincolnshire estate had been in structural decline for 4 years, and whose steward had recently retired without a replacement being found. She had mentioned it to her husband, and her husband had written to Genevra's father and been redirected to Genevra directly, and Genevra had agreed to come and look at the estate. She spent 3 days at the Marsden estate in December. She looked at the accounts, which were honest but unsophisticated. She walked the north boundary fields, which had a soil management problem that had been reducing yields for 2 years. She spoke to 4 of the tenant farmers, who told her things they had not told the steward because the steward had not asked. She reviewed the estate's maintenance records, which showed a pattern of deferred work that was producing compounding costs. She produced a written assessment and a prioritized action list and presented it to Sir Edward and his wife at dinner on the 3rd evening. Sir Edward read the assessment with the expression of a man reading something that is confirming what he feared and also telling him it is not too late. He asked 6 questions. She answered all 6. "What do you charge?" he said. She told him. He agreed immediately, which told her she had undercharged, which was information she filed for the next client. The Marsden engagement ran through February. During those 3 months, 2 additional inquiries arrived, one from a family in Yorkshire who had heard about the Marsden work through a county connection, and one from a family in Derbyshire who had been given her name directly by Lady Whitmore, who had apparently decided that Genevra's work was something she was going to actively recommend. She took both. By March, she had 3 active engagements and was charging 30% more than she had charged Sir Edward. By the following July, which was approximately 9 months after she had placed the ring on the desk, she had completed 5 engagements and had 2 more in progress, including one with Lord Alderton of the East County, whose estate bordered Pemberton Hall on the northern edge, and who had been referred to her by Lord Fenwick, whose estate she had restructured in April. The Alderton engagement was where she first understood that her work was reaching Aldric's county in a way that he was going to notice. Lord Alderton mentioned at a routine meeting about his tenant relationships that he had heard the Pemberton Hall estate had been having some management difficulties since the separation. He mentioned it not as gossip but as professional context, the way that people mention relevant information to someone who might need it. She received the information with the composed attention she brought to most things and asked one question to clarify what he meant by difficulties. He meant that the Eastfield drainage project, which had been planned for 3 years, had been deferred indefinitely because the new arrangement for managing the estate accounts had produced a cash flow gap that made the capital investment impossible. He meant that 2 senior tenants had given notice of their intention not to renew their leases, which was the kind of thing that happens when a tenant relationship has been managed by someone who understood the relationship and then is managed by someone who does not. He mentioned all of this because he thought it might be useful context. She thanked him and moved on to the Alderton business, which was what she was there for. Before we continue, subscribe now and tell me in the comments. Genevra heard that Aldric's estate was declining, the estate she had managed for 11 years. And she moved on to the next item on the meeting agenda. What do you think she felt in that moment, and what does it tell you about where she was 1 year after the ring? She finished the Alderton engagement in August, which was almost exactly 1 year after the ring conversation. The August after that was the following year's August, which was when Aldric came. He came in the rain, which was not calculated. It was a September afternoon that had started clear and become wet in the way of early autumn in the north of England, and he had driven from Pemberton Hall to the Dower House without having fully planned the visit, which was itself a statement about the state he was in. Aldric Pemberton was not a man who arrived at places without planning. He was a man of organized habits and considered decisions. And the fact that he was standing at the door of the Dower House in September, rain, without having sent a note first, was information about how long he had been sitting with the decision to come before he had made himself do it. Genevra's housekeeper opened the door. He asked for Genevra. The housekeeper, a woman named Mrs. Aldred who had been with Genevra since the first week at the Dower House and who had formed her own views about various things, looked at him with the expression of someone who knows who is standing at the door and is reserving her response until she knows what Genevra wants to do about it. "Who shall I say is calling?" she said. He told her. She showed him to the sitting room, which was the room Genevra used for client meetings and which had been arranged for exactly that purpose, comfortable but organized, with the quality of a professional space that was also a personal one. She asked him to wait and went to find Genevra. He stood in the sitting room and looked at the room. The room told him things. It told him that the person who occupied the Dower House was working. The desk in the corner had the organized condition of a desk that is used regularly, and the files on the shelves were labeled in the specific way of a filing system that has been built rather than accumulated. It told him that the person was successful, not ostentatiously, but in the way that rooms are honest about the people in them when the people are too focused on their work to perform for the space. There was a framed letter on the wall above the desk. He looked at it because it was there, and he was waiting. It was from Sir Edward Marsden, thanking her for the work at the Lincolnshire estate, and noting that the yield improvement in the north boundary fields had exceeded the projection she had given him. He was still looking at the letter when she came in. She was wearing the kind of dress she had never worn in their marriage, a plain, well-made working dress in dark wool that communicated nothing about social occasions and everything about a woman who had things to do. Her hair was arranged efficiently rather than formally. She looked, he thought, like herself in a way she had not looked in 11 years of being his wife, which was an observation that arrived with more discomfort than he had anticipated. "Aldric," she said. "Genevra," he said. She sat in the chair across from the one he chose, which was the arrangement of the room, the professional arrangement, client, across the desk. He had been in client meetings. He knew the arrangement. "You're wet," she said. "Yes," he said. "I should have sent a note." "You should have," she agreed. "What can I do for you?" He looked at her. He had thought about what he was going to say. He had been thinking about it since July, when he had heard, through his steward, who had heard from Lord Alderton's steward, that Genevra was doing estate consulting work in the county, and that 3 of his neighboring estates had engaged her. He had been thinking about it more urgently since August, when Lord Fenwick had mentioned, at a shooting party, that Genevra had restructured the Fenwick estate's tenant arrangement in April, and that the results had been better than expected, and had mentioned it with the warm appreciation of a man who has had good work done and attributes it accurately. He had been thinking about it since September the 3rd, which was when his own steward had sat across from him with the East Field drainage reports and had explained, for the 3rd time, why the capital investment wasn't possible in the current cash flow structure, and when Aldric had understood, not for the first time, but for the first time, with full clarity, that the estate's cash flow structure had been in its current inadequate condition since the autumn of the previous year, which was when Genevra had left. "I need to tell you 2 things," he said, "in a specific order. The first is about the estate. The second is about myself." She looked at him with the composed attention she had always brought to things that required it. "The estate," he said. "Lord Alderton mentioned that you'd done work with him. Lord Fenwick said the same. My steward has explained to me, 3 times, a problem that I believe you would have identified and resolved before it became a problem." He paused. "I want to engage your firm for the Pemberton Hall estate, at whatever rate you charge, through the professional channels." She looked at him for a moment. "That's a professional request," she said. "Yes," he said. "Then I'll consider it professionally," she said. "Which means I'll need to review the current estate accounts and talk to your steward before I say yes or no. It's possible there are conflicts of interest that make the engagement inadvisable. It's also possible that 11 years of having managed the accounts makes me the most efficient person available." "The second option is almost certainly true," he said. "I'll look at the accounts," she said. "What's the second thing?" He looked at the letter from Sir Edward Marsden on the wall above her desk. "The second thing," he said, "is that I am standing here wet because I have been trying to make myself come for 2 months, and today I ran out of reasons not to." He paused. "I told you the marriage had run its course, which was what my solicitor told me to say. The accurate version is that I had allowed myself to believe that the things I valued were things you were providing automatically rather than things you were choosing to provide." He paused. "I did not understand the difference between automatic and chosen until the room was quiet." She was quiet. "The ring on the desk," he said. "I didn't understand what that was when I came back into the study. I thought it was dignity. I've been understanding, across the past year, that it wasn't dignity. It was you being done with something that had stopped being worth doing." He looked at his hands. "I want you to know that I understand that now, not because understanding it changes anything that's already happened, because you deserve to know that the person who said what I said in that study understands what he actually said." She looked at him for a long time. The rain was coming against the dower house windows. The sitting room was warm. The filing system on the shelves was organized in the way she organized things, by date and client and engagement type, a system that she had built in the first 2 weeks and which had grown logically from its own foundations. "You're very wet," she said again. "I drove over without planning it properly," he said. "I can see that," she said. "Mrs. Aldred will bring tea." She stood and went to the door and called for Mrs. Aldred, who appeared with the speed of someone who has been nearby in case she was needed. "Tea," Genevra said, "and something to dry with for Lord Pemberton." "Yes, my lady," Mrs. Aldred said, without any expression that indicated she found this situation anything other than ordinary. She came back and sat. "The estate accounts," she said. "Send them by the end of the week. I'll review them over the weekend and let you know if the engagement is viable." "And," he said. "The other thing," she said, "requires me to think about it longer than tea takes." She looked at him steadily. You are not the same man who came into the study with a prepared speech. I can see that. But I am also not the same woman who sat with her hands folded in her lap and then removed her ring and left without a word. And the distance between who we were then and who we are now is not something that resolves over tea. No, he said. I know that. What do you want to happen? She said. He thought about this. I want to start from where we are, he said. Not from where we were, from here, which means the estate engagement, if you take it, is the estate engagement. It is not a route to anything else unless something else develops from it, honestly. He paused. And if you send me away today and never take the engagement and never speak to me again, I will understand that this visit required a year to make and arrived too late. He paused again. I am telling you this so you understand that I am not here to negotiate. I am here because I came. She looked at him. Mrs. Aldred arrived with tea and a towel, both of which she placed on the side table with the composed efficiency of a woman who considers this within the normal scope of her duties. Genevra poured the tea. She handed him a cup. Tell me about the drainage problem, she said. He looked at her. The East Field drainage, she said. Your steward has explained it to you 3 times. I want to hear your understanding of it. He told her about the drainage problem. She listened with the focused attention she brought to estate problems, which was the attention of someone who understood the systems and was identifying where the explanation revealed the actual issue. She asked 2 questions. He answered them. The problem isn't the capital, she said. The problem is the cash flow structure that makes the capital seem unavailable when it isn't. She picked up her own cup. It's solvable. I've seen the same structure misidentified 3 times this year. The solution is in how the estate accounts are sequenced, not in the amounts. You know this from looking at the estate accounts I haven't sent you yet, he said. I know it because it's a common problem in estates the size of Pemberton, she said. The accounts will tell me if I'm right. I usually am. He looked at her. She was looking at her cup, which she held with both hands in the way she held things she was thinking about. Genevra, he said. Yes, she said. The ring, he said. When you placed it on the desk, were you done with me or were you done with what I had made of us? She was quiet for a moment. I was done, she said, carefully, with being the person in the room who was managing things while the other person believed they were just happening. She looked at him. I was not done with you in a way that felt permanent. I was done with a version of us that was not honest. And now, she said, you have driven here in the rain without planning it, and have admitted that the speech you gave me was your solicitor's language, and have sat in my client chair and told me what you actually understood. She paused. That is more honesty than 11 years of marriage produced. I know, he said. So we start from here, she said. The drainage problem first, then we see. He finished his tea. She walked him to the door. The rain had eased to the quality of English October that is not quite raining, but is not quite stopping, the specific neither nor of a season in transition. The accounts by Friday, she said. Friday, he agreed. He went to the carriage. She stood in the doorway and watched it go down the Dower House Drive, which was a drive she had arranged to have replanted with proper drainage channels because the original drainage was inadequate and it needed doing. She went back to the sitting room. The teacups were still on the table. She looked at the letter from Sir Edward on the wall. The north boundary yield improvement, exceeding the projection. She went to the desk and opened the Alderton file and found where she had left the work, which was the secondary tenant structure, which needed addressing before the winter. The accounts would arrive Friday. She would review them over the weekend. She would make the professional decision on the professional merits. The other thing would take longer. That was all right. She had learned across the year of the ring that things worth doing were worth taking the time to do correctly, and that starting from where you actually were was always better than starting from where you wished you were. She picked up her pen. The Alderton file needed finishing.